When I first started using Cloud Code, I was like, this is a game changer, and I felt it, right? Because I actually use it also on the weekends on my kind of like a vibe coded hobby project, let's say, to just see what it can do, right? And it did perform like spectacularly.
I'd say like maybe the last 18 months, generative AI is just exploded. And I'd say even like the last six months, maybe last 12 months with like things like Cursor and Copilot, Claude Code and Codex and all the engineering side Copilots and generative AI development. It's unbelievable.
You said like a personal life anecdote, I guess, at work. Yes, of course, I do use it a lot. Actually, lately, I do use it a lot more than just writing code. I even caught myself for things like sometimes I write prompts that are longer than the change needed, right? So I have my mind has shifted, like seriously. It's prompting. It's no longer coding.
All right. Welcome, episode 5, Agents of Change. I'm your host, Justin Tannenbaum. And today's awesome guest is Piotr Szyperski, our head of engineering here at AppStream Studio. Welcome, Piotr.
Hi, everyone. Hey, Justin.
I appreciate you making the time out of the busy schedule to jump on. Would love to just kind of start off and just kind of hear your origin story. How did you work your way into technology, into software development? Where'd you start? Now you're responsible for 14 engineers here at AppStream, and even leading some high profile client engagements. There's got to be a good evil villain arc here to your story. We'd love to hear it.
Yeah, I don't know if it is evil, Yeah, but that's true. I never anticipated it would go like this, but. I always loved computers. Wasn't much of a programmer when I was a kid. Maybe when it comes to hacking games, something like that, like trying to find a way to break the game, basically. Then I just went to university. I was always better with maths than with history, let's say. I just chose like the toughest course I could get on Warsaw University Technology, and it was computer science. And I almost never finished it, actually, because I got a nice job, and the job was a lot more interesting than the university. So that was hard. Like I actually did manage to finish the bachelor, so I'm kind of proud of that. Even though my career was telling me like, screw that. Let's just focus on the work.
What was the job? You got this job in while at school?
Yeah, I was on the second year, I think, of the uni. And it was actually the job at BankUp, so that was my first and like the kind of like the biggest job of my career, I would say, when it comes at least to the timeline. Back then at the very beginning, it was not BankUp. The name was Momentum. We were actually doing a completely different thing. So the company went through, I think, 1 or 2 pivots, and it ended up being BankUp. So it was my second year. I got into the job. I was a full stack back then. There was a lot of CSS, a lot of .NET, a lot of JavaScript. CSS was always, the most magical, I guess. You had to know some golden rules. It was the era of Stack Overflow, obviously. Actually, most of my career was the era of Stack Overflow, which is, it's kind of sad to see what happened. Like, it basically died, right? But it was a very big part of my, development as a software engineer. The best tool you could get was, Google and Stack Overflow. And in that company, I lived through two pivots. I was there for 8 years, I think. Then I moved from full stack to backend. Luckily, I'm very happy that it happened, We moved on to Azure and whole, basically, Microsoft, everything Microsoft, basically. And then, so that was the 8 years during which I have managed to finish the university. And then I have met you. One very important person that I met in BankUp was Łukasz, that I know And I know the listeners of our podcast who have managed to listen to the previous episodes with Łukasz know him as well. So I met him at Backup, and then through him I met you, and then we have decided to make the best decision ever. That is to found this company. This is where I am basically.
No, I love it. Just out of curiosity, I guess we're coming up on year 4 together, right? Or year 3?
Might be. I have time tracking is not my strongest part.
Yeah, I'm having a brain fart at the moment. But year 4 of AppStream Studio. Do you remember like with the origin story of like how we, do you remember how we kind of came up with this and how we decided to, guys from halfway around the world from each other decided to launch, top generative AI, solutions, provider and company in Tennessee. But do you remember like day 0 by chance?
Day 0. I mean, I know I was in India back then.
Where?
So honestly, the time difference was kind of a killer. I remember, having meetings like that started like 11 p.m. things like that. But yeah, I mean, I know that. I don't remember exactly. I just remember that I think Łukasz approached me, and I know that we have like us and you, Justin, we have met on another engagement, and we just like working with each other very much. Łukasz approached me basically if should we do something on our own, and I was like, it's exciting, and it's probably there's never going to be a better time than now, right? So from my perspective, I had some years of experience. If I continue down the road, like from a career perspective, it makes sense to put everything in one basket, let's say, and you just let's try and do this. Yeah. And also, it was like you said, it was a very, very great time when it comes to AI world, right? Because it was a time where everything started booming. So a lot of things have happened in the very right moment, I believe, for us to enter this space, right? I'm very glad we did, and
yeah, 100%.
Yeah, I guess
you make a great point. It was weird, right when we started the company. This was the worst market for software services.
That is true.
Like the history of software development, and then we survived. Yeah, we didn't thrive, but we survived that first 8 months. That is true. Our second full year, we 3x'd, or no, we 10x'd the first year. The third year, we 4x'd from that, and then this year, look, we're looking to double again. But yeah, you're spot on. Like I'd say like maybe the last 18 months, generative AI is just exploded, and even I'd say even like the last six months, maybe last 12 months, with like things like Cursor and Copilot and Claude Code and Codex and all the engineering side copilots and generative AI development. It's unbelievable. I actually just got back from a conference where I gave a talk on generative AI, and in my talk I was like, what's happened over like the last 12 months? And it's like two things I want to point out. Was one, generative AI has gone from like toy to utility. Like it's unbelievable what we can do now. And then 2, I almost equate it back to like it's such a evolution of technology. I compared it to like the printing press and the cotton gin and telecom and mobility and the cloud, and it's like the next
absolutely
technological thing we do. It's so right. Like I'm curious, how are you using AI in your personal development? I know we are in the studio, but I'd be curious to see like what's your thoughts and what are you using, and maybe we do a little a segment on how I AI today.
Sure. Yeah, of course. Like these are some spot on points that you're raising yourself. And actually, let me start by this. I don't know if funny or not thing, but I will boast a little bit. I'm since I think 4 months. I'm a father, first time, and let me tell you that when the when the little guy was born and I was in the hospital, I was like, I don't know. I don't know. He burped or he was crying or I didn't know what to do. I was like, ChatGPT. What do I do? What do I do? So it was like I was like, how did people do that before? I guess you just. I mean, it's a great tool to get an answer fast. It's not, of course, it's not like super well researched answer, and if you want to make like big decisions, it's definitely better to do some own your own like old school research using Google and things like that. But it gives you an answer fast, right? And if there's a baby crying or something like that, then I've got no idea what I'm doing. It was a great help. But yeah, this was just like you said, like a personal life anecdote, I guess. But at work, yes, of course, I do use it a lot. Actually, lately, I do use it a lot more than just writing code. I even code myself, for things like sometimes I write prompts that are longer than the change needed, right? So I have like my mind has shifted, like seriously. It's prompting. It's no longer coding. Sometimes I still do touch the code, but it's definitely more often I use code specifically.
I'm curious. Are you finding that your critical thinking skills, as leadership? You're in a leadership position now, but like, are your critical thinking skills of like tactically writing, reviewing, and you'll say manually, like writing code or reviewing code, or like that critical thinking aspect. Have you noticed any degradation there, or?
I did actually. I did at some point. I did, and which was like a bulb above my head, and like something is not going right here, right? So yeah, when I first started using Cloud Code, I was like, this is a game changer, and I felt it, right? Because I actually use it also on the weekends on my kind of like a vibe coded hobby project, let's say, to just see what it can do, right? And it did perform like spectacularly, like from zero to having like a full blown application with backend, with front end, with nice looking front end, which I would never have been able to do myself, right? And it did it fast, and it did work. And I was flabbergasted, honestly.
What was the app that you vibe coded?
Oh, it was just like a home finance tool. I'm sure there is like 1,000 of them, but I didn't like any of them. So having Claude, I decided to do one myself. And I was really impressed by what it did. And so then I moved in my professional workflow. I started using it more and more. And yeah, I guess I just started learning how to use it. I still do. I still don't have like set in stone workflow that works every time, and that I know it works, and that I know there is no better way to work with it, because I'm sure there is. But first few times I did work with it, I did code myself, like you were saying. I think the hard thing here is that probably reading code is harder than writing code, because like when you write code, yourself, you put in all the keywords, exactly what they are there for, and then when you read it, your brain is like, yeah, I know exactly what it does, right? And when you read code that is written by someone else, you do have to put in a lot more effort to understand what it does, basically, right? Mm-hmm. And AI tools, I feel like they have a tendency to write a little bit more than few months, maybe. Like there is a lot
verbose.
Yeah. And then there is just a lot to read. And sometimes, in the beginning, I didn't try and understand it, as profoundly as because I wanted to do it fast, to ship fast. And I trusted it works. There were tests. It did work. But, then I didn't, when I was working like that, I realized I am not forming this, this attachment to code. Like, because when I write code myself, I take a peek at a piece of code that I have written before, or I have reviewed my colleague that did this, and I almost instantly know what does the class do, how it behaves, where it is used, and things like that. But with AI written code, I didn't have this kind of attachment to the code. And I have, when I felt that a few times, I realized this is like really bad, and I have to change the way I work with it. And well, basically, the big difference is that I now spend like most of my working time is actually planning, talking with Cloud Code. We have like a document that we work on, basically a PRD. And it actually does take a lot of time. I'm actually not 100% sure that working this way right now is faster than as if I were to do it myself. I don't know. It's also very hard to know this, because how would I calculate that, right? Like estimating time has always been super hard in engineering.
Always the hardest.
Yeah.
What are these story points? What does this mean? It's not hours? No, it's level of complexity, right?
No. T-shirt sizes, right?
That's it. So I'm curious, like high level, do you mind sharing like your personal workflow for how you're, using Cloud Code in this example? Like what is that high level, your major muscle movement workflow look like?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So first thing is, obviously, I take a task that we have, prepared and groomed over planning. Usually, I try to put it then in my own words in my notepad, or I use Sublime Text, but whatever, Notepad is fine as well. I try to put it all, in my own words. And then I actually ask Claude to write a nice PRD for that, having all the code base in context, right? So it works on my description of the task and the context of the code base. Sometimes, because we do work on distributed systems, so sometimes we all, there are multiple repos engaged. So, to write a good PRD, you have to have the knowledge of another repo. So I just start Claude, a directory hire, and I tell him, look at this repo and this PRD and, this description of the task, write me a nice PRD for that, right? And also I'm still working on the prompt for Claude to write a nice PRD, because it writes too much code examples. So, in the PRD, it tries to implement the solution, right? I don't know. It always does that. I'm not sure why. Maybe it's just looking at too much code. So that's the first part. The PRD, I then go through it. And it actually is the most time, most of my day, it looks like this. I read through the PRD. I'm saying like, this bit does not make sense. This has to be changed, blah, 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 blah. And we iterate over that. Sometimes one iteration is enough. Sometimes it's 5. It's, yeah. So that's the first part. Secondly, I'm now using a technique that is called Ralph. I actually have a tool for that. So basically, the idea is that you have a prompt and you feed it to Claude, and you feed it a lot of times, basically in a loop. yeah, and it tries to get it, in every iteration, it tries to get it better, tries to complete, the task in a more complete way. And it does work nice, actually, if you have the PRD, like if it's very specific, if there is not a lot of, decisions to be made, but only the implementation is left, it works pretty nice. And it actually is quite amazing, that I have a task and actually just, planning it out is the work. This is the work I do, right? Mm-hmm. Implementation is just, it happens over 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes. It used to take a day, I guess, or something like that for me. Now planning takes maybe half a day, like I said, comparing the time is very hard, but right now my work is planning, like having the, creating the mental model of how to implement a task, not implementing the task, right?
Mm-hmm. And then you're handing that off to Claude Code to actually implement, but you're using Ralph. And for people who aren't familiar with Ralph is basically autonomous. Think of it as like an autonomous for loop of Claude Code, like sans no human in the loop. It just autonomously runs and runs and runs until basically human either intervenes or the output is reached, the desired output is reached. Based off of some reward function or goal, but exactly. And then what's the last step of that?
Oh, it is not even the last step yet. But yeah, so Ralph loops until it finds a point of satisfaction, let's say, and then I actually work on GitHub. So I open a draft pull request because I am used to doing code review for my colleagues. I now do a code review for myself. So this is a weird thing that has happened, but hey, this is how it works. So I open a draft pull request for myself. I actually add comments in my own pull request saying, this has to be changed. This doesn't make sense, blah, blah, blah. Basically using GitHub as a notepad for myself. Mm-hmm. Then the loop continues. So I take after I have gone through the whole pull request, I just gather all the comments, put them in a prompt. And if it's a few comments, I just maybe do them one by one using like regular Claude Code session. If it's a lot, if a big refactor is still needed, I again create a refactoring PRD, put it in Ralph again, and it goes on. Hopefully not a lot of iterations, but yeah.
Oh, it's fascinating. I think there's a couple of things, like really awesome insights there, and that we're learning as a company too. One, a quick plug for recruiting. If you do come work for us, everyone gets a Claude Code Team Max plan that comes to work for us. All engineers and even everyone in the company has one now. So we're all Claude skill maxing. But I think what's interesting is like the shift of more thought into the planning and the PRD to letting the agent implement, you reviewing, and then iterating kind of in that loop right there until the desired, business outcome, task, user story, bug fix, etc. is warranted. But there's a couple of really interesting things. Like one, like the framework and how to think about software development has changed, right? Even like architecture, we're now finding that coding agents thrive in monorepos, right? Where everything is in context and everything is there for the agent to kind of grok and search through, versus split across the repositories. It's solvable, but just finding that interesting.
Yeah.
Two, Markdown. Markdown-based documentation, Markdown-based PRDs, Markdown-based library docs, right? Turns out to be amazing training data for your autonomous coding agent. It's like funny, this like shift. Monorepo, Markdown, and like the shift to like, now I'm really like planning versus implementing more and kind of orchestrating the agent in a way. This is a fascinating shift to how things have done, were done in the past, right? Where we spend more time on the implementation solution, less, we would enough on planning, grooming, etc., to have like good ideas. The gist, a product manager would would tell a team, the kind of the what and the why, right? And the product team would be like actually implement and spend all their time on the how, right? When we implement the solution.
Yeah.
But now it's like, the emphasis of the software development lifecycle is kind of shifted to more emphasis on planning, the what and the why, than the implementation. The third piece is architecture patterns. I guess we're seeing internally, and I actually tip my hat to you and Lukasz, because you guys were the first to introduce it to me of vertical slices. I believe is the pattern.
Yeah.
It turns out that coding agents love vertical slices, right? Like all of this domain logic in a vertical slice that they can act on and have context of.
That is true.
It's kind of fascinating to see this like shift. I think the one thing we got wrong, candidly, was we always shied away from monorepos, and it turns out, well, actually, monorepo in this age is better, than not. So we've got some refactoring on some work we need to do to go back to monorepos, but it really is fascinating to kind of see. I'm curious. Would you be open to like doing a quick screen share and seeing your Claude, your Claude setup?
Yeah, sure.
Are you taking advantage of skills or MCPs or sub agents, or like how are you Claude coding? Like where does Ralph come in? Like I would love to see it.
Sure. So let me share my screen. So basically, I have a lot of tabs here, each with actually for this project I don't have, so I will add it here. Each with Git. And there's this, crazy nice program that is called LazyGit that I recommend to everyone. It has super nice, command line interface. It's just awesome. So please check it out. So I am checked out on my branch here. On the other tab, it's the same project. I have Claude Code. So yeah, and I love the color tabs here, so that each project gets its own color, so that I can quickly see where are things. And also here I have this first tab in orange is my WSL. So the Ralph plugin I'm using it. For some reason, people in open source community, they lately they act as if Windows does not exist. I'm like, okay, but luckily there's WSL, so I have it running here. So I'm working here on Windows, and I need to do some tasks. So first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna tell Claude like my or the task is for the API to add a cake emoji to every string response, write a PRD for that, basically. Or no, I wouldn't say write a PRD for that. I would say create an MD document with a PRD. Something like this. So it's gonna do its own thinking. I'm gonna then have to push it. Okay, while it's thinking, I can show one more interesting skill that I sometimes use. Lately, not that often, honestly, but still. It's called the plugin or the skill is called QuintCode. It's based on a framework that is called First Principle Framework. And it's basically a framework that helps you make informed decisions. It's nice for architectural decisions, for example. So the idea is that if you have a problem that you want to solve, and it's probably going to involve an architectural decision, you can run this plugin. It has like, I think 5 stages. And the idea is that it generates a few hypotheses how to solve your problem, and they are competing against each other. In different phases, it does web research. It tries to mitigate some biases. And it basically it is a structured way of making a decision like this. You can add your own hypothesis to it, and then you just basically run it, and it creates some nice nice ADRs. It's great for making ADRs. Yeah.
Sorry, what's ADR stand for?
It's architectural decision record. So you just ideally in your repository you have a list of ADR files where it is documented. Why is this in a separate service and not here? Why is this parallel and not sequential? Things like that.
Yeah.
Okay, I think our PRD is ready. We have nice cake emoji here. We have to cut it. Editor, I just shown the name of the repository that I should not have shown. Resume here. All right. So we have the PRD ready. Let me find it in my, where was it? Docs design. Cake emoji MD. All right, so here's the PRD. Yeah, goal scope. Okay, enhance all API string responses by automatically appending a cake emoji. The great thing about Cloud Code is it does not ask why, so it just goes with it. Yeah. Okay. So here's a PRD. I would normally religiously go through it. I'm not gonna do it now. I'll just push it. So I'll comment that PRD, PRD for cake emoji. I have to push it and I have to pull. I'm not using Windows repos here. I have separate repos in my WSL because it works faster this way with files. Oh no. Okay, it's here actually. Okay, so I have this this plugin that is called. I have to call Ralph import. Sorry, I have to point it to the file. So docs AB cake emoji and the project name. So what the plugin does now is it reads through the PRD and it creates basically another PRD that is readable for the Ralph plugin. So it has phases that are prioritized. Well, basically, it's just in the right format. So we'll wait for that to happen. Does take some time, huh?
We can insert the Jeopardy theme music here.
Yeah, for sure. There is one more nice skill that I know, or plugin actually. I'm not sure about the lingo here. For Cloud Code, which is called Beads. I don't know if you've heard of that. Basically, it's like a Jira for Cloud Code. So you have tasks, you have epics, tasks, bugs, all of that, Jira things, or project management things in general. But it's all in the back end. You have like /beads create task, or, you can then just ask Claude, what's the next task, or, start working on that. So this is nice. I've been using this on this hobby project. I think it's nice, but it's nice for like one person projects mostly. You can also add it to your repository and work with others on that. But I don't think we as a team are there yet.
No, not yet.
Yeah, but like you said, the biggest shift in oh, there we go. The biggest shift in my work as a software dev is that I no longer do that much writing. I do much more reading. So yeah, okay. It has finished, and it tells me to review the created files. So I think the most important one is the fixed plan. This is the one that it then mostly works on. Of course, it is aware of the other files as well. So we should review all of them, but let's just take a look at the fixed plan at this point. So yeah, and here we have the tasks in a nice MD file. Core implementation. It wants to add a middleware. Yeah, and basically it just then works. It then loops on that document, fulfilling the tasks here, and that's it. I could run it. Okay, actually,
not using any skills like you don't have any like predefined skills. Skills.md folder in your Claude. Setup. You're really just using Claude plugins and Ralph feeding PRDs, letting Ralph autonomously execute the PRD. You're reviewing it, etc. on a loop, and then so you're satisfied basically.
Yeah,
that's super interesting.
And this is the monitor view of Ralph. So basically, when it runs, it says here, it's loop 1. This is refreshing automatically. Here's logs from the working session. Yeah, and it just loops here. It tells me when it's done. Another very nice and very useful. I don't know if hack is not too much, but let's say hack for Cloud Code is that you can edit settings to make a beep when it finishes thinking or finishes the task, so that you can minimize it.
When you're off scrolling Instagram while
yeah, but whatever you're doing, it could be Instagram, but yeah, you just hear it when it's done. Yeah. So that's you don't have to stare at the screen when it says, discombobulating or whatever it's doing then. Okay. Yeah. So that's a nice hack as well. Yeah, no, I don't use any skills that I have done myself.
Okay.
I just have a few prompts. Yeah.
No, go ahead.
So one prompt I have found on the internet, and I like it really much, is basically it says this: do a git diff and pretend you're a senior dev doing a code review and you hate this implementation. Basically, what would you criticize? Yeah, and it's pretty good. And then the hate is all caps, so yeah, it's a bit funny also. Yeah, but it generally does catch things.
That's great.
Yeah, the problem I have with all the plugins and frameworks, I know there are like a few very that I have on my to check out list is BMAD and Compound Engineering plugin. I think BMAD is kind of like it kind of mimics a real team where there's agents that are responsible for different things. There's like a product guy, design guy, things like that. And it does sound good, but it's just the problem I have right now with all of this is that the space of AI coding is so it's so volatile, it's so chaotic, it's everything boomed in one moment, and it's there is no established solutions yet. You have to pick something and then just try it. And you also a person like me, unfortunately, I don't have time to check out all of these. I'm sure, a lot of these are super tools, but, there's just so many of them. And if you go to YouTube or LinkedIn, there's, basically people trying to farm clicks, saying that, this this will build your enterprise idea in 2 days. So yeah, like every framework is the best framework, of course.
No, of course. So I'm curious, while this loops, like, where do you see this like getting dangerous for engineers?
Dangerous as in machines are going to take over, or I'm going to be out of work.
Perhaps both. I don't know. Your opinion of like, where does this autonomous coding agent like become maybe a problem we're not thinking of, today? Like, basically short-term gains for long-term sacrifices, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think at this point, while the biggest hype wave, I think, is behind us, people have now realized, I think, that you're not gonna build at this point in time. You're not gonna build, enterprise solutions with AI agents only. Like, you need humans to review that, to take, to be an important part in designing and reviewing and
security,
you need,
right?
Yeah, of course. But not only security.
We think we saw over the weekend, like, was it Claudebot, or that is now, I think, renamed Molt, whatever. Basically, a whole bunch of like home noobs, for lack of a better term, have been deploying this autonomous, agent on their laptops and Mac Minis, and turns out there's huge security vulnerabilities, like all across them that are acceptable to prompt injection and all sorts of things that some white hat hackers have found, and luckily are disclosing and opening up CVEs and everything. But yeah, you make a great point about you're not going to build this enterprise solution, especially for like a regulated industry. Maybe it could be assisted, but at the end of the day, like, you're still going to need a human
for sure
to review everything.
And also, I will just add one more thing, because security is a great point, but also I think at this point in time, humans' context window is a lot bigger than cloud calls, let's say. So if the solution gets bigger and bigger, it does things here. It doesn't really see what is happening there. And things start getting conflicting. Things are not optimized. It's just wrapping your head around a big project is hard for humans as well. But for an AI coder with a limited context window, it's basically impossible. If for a solution of a given size, right?
That's true. Fast forward 24 months from now, how do you think engineers will use tools like this? Or maybe how will they, what will work look like for them? 24 months?
Yeah, 24 months, man, I don't know, but
that's an eternity in the AI world.
Yeah, it is for sure. I mean, one thing that I'm actually a little scared of, or I think, coming back to your question about dangers, I'm really curious to see, because like I said, I was Googling, I was using Stack Overflow, right? But people who enter the programming space now, they have all these tools at their disposal, and I'm really curious how is it going to impact the new generation of software developments, software developers that are basically bred on this kind of tools, right? Like, how is it going to impact how they think about developing, how people think about developing basically IT systems. This kind of scares me. I'm not sure. I think I don't see the precise danger, but I have so much no idea about how it's gonna impact it in that area that it's kind of scary for me.
That's a great point. Peter, just kind of wrapping up here as we let Ralph continuously loop. If you could give one rule to an engineer just starting out with Claude Code, what would it be?
Read it. Don't just accept it. Read it. That would be the most basic, I think.
I love it. And if folks wanted to find your musings online, connect with you, follow you, or get to learn more about how you're cloud coding, where can folks find you online?
Well, basically, you can. Well, I have just realized that my background says Justin Tannenbaum, so I wanted to. I wanted to direct you guys to this thing right here, but it's Justin, yeah. So yeah, you that's not me. No. Yeah. So you can find me on LinkedIn. You can input Piotr Szyperski. If you're Polish, that's gonna be easy for you, I guess. If you're not, I'm sure it will be written down somewhere, so you can maybe copy that, or you can just find me through AppStream Studio. Yeah, that would be the easiest way, I believe. I don't think Ralph is going to finish that. The task is not that easy, apparently.
Yeah, no kidding. I love it. Well, Peter, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it, and love putting you on the spot for this segment, how I cloud code. And I'm looking forward to doing this more with folks at the AppStream. Hope you have a wonderful day, and appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you for having me.